Welcome, focus learners, to this explainer. I'm so thrilled you're joining us today because we're going to dive into something that literally transforms good communication into absolute mastery. You know, a lot of times we think great writing is all about having this massive vocabulary or finding that one perfect adjective. But honestly, it's really about structural architecture. It's about how we build the scaffolding for our thoughts. So today, we're unpacking the underlying blueprints of how we organize complex texts, really breaking down those essential frameworks that dictate exactly how information flows from a page straight into a reader's mind.
Let's take a quick look at our agenda. We'll be covering the architecture of ideas, writing the cyclic process, cycles in action, the domino effect, degrees of certainty, and finally, mastering cause and effect.
All right, Section 1, the architecture of ideas, organizing complex texts. Here's a fundamental truth we really just have to embrace. Disorganized structures can completely ruin brilliant ideas. I mean, you can have literally the most fascinating data in the world, but if it lacks a logical framework, it just falls apart.
So to really wrap our heads around structure, we first need to contrast a standard chronological process with a natural repeating cycle. A linear process is exactly what it sounds like, right? It has a definite input, moves through step A, then step B, and finishes with a very clear output or result. It's safe, it's predictable, and it has a definitive beginning and end. But nature? Well, nature rarely works that neatly. A cyclic process is continuous. The steps just sort of merge into one another. And crucially, there's no clear starting point. This creates this really fascinating narrative tension for a writer. I mean, where exactly do you start explaining something that technically has no beginning?
Visually mapping out this exact dilemma, you can see how a cyclic process operates. In a loop, one step continuously merges into and emerges right out of the next. Step 1 becomes step 2, which becomes step 3, which circles right back around. There is no finish line here. The cycle simply continues.
Moving on to Section 2, writing the cyclic process, entering the endless loop. Let's see how this builds into practical application. How does a writer actually construct a coherent paragraph about an endless sequence without, leaving the reader just spinning in circles?
First, we really need to ground ourselves in this precise definition. A cyclic process is a sequence of stages that continuously repeats with no definitive start or end point. Because of that, a writer has to strategically and artificially choose an entry point for the reader. Nature doesn't hand you a start here sign, so you, as the architect of the text, have to build one yourself. And here is your foundational toolkit to do exactly that. These are 4 absolutely essential steps to prevent your reader from getting hopelessly lost in a continuous cycle, kind of like the carbon cycle or the water cycle. Number 1, you've got to consider the best point to enter the cycle. Number 2, break the cycle down into definable stages. Number 3, use a clear thesis statement for your introductory paragraph so the reader knows exactly what loop they're entering. And number 4, use distinct topic sentences for each paragraph within your text. This acts as a guide, walking the reader from one merge stage to the very next.
Okay, Section 3, Cycles in Action, Real-World Loops. Let's examine how these theoretical rules are actually deployed when describing real-world biological and mechanical systems.
Let's take a look at the malaria parasite life cycle. By breaking down this cycle, we can see exactly how a continuous natural phenomenon has to be forced into digestible, sequential bites. We artificially start with step 1, a mosquito injects saliva. Step 2, parasites enter the human liver to change and multiply. Step 3, those parasites attack blood cells, which causes malaria. And step 4, a new form of the parasite enters a new biting mosquito, and boom, the cycle continues endlessly. We took a continuous loop and gave it a structured, highly readable sequence.
This brilliantly illustrates the momentum of that sequence. But remember, when you're building these cyclic steps, focus is literally everything. If you're writing about the malaria cycle, you absolutely must actively omit irrelevant details. For example, if you throw in random facts about houseflies transmitting microbes or diseases transmitted by tiny water animals, you completely break the loop. To keep the cycle intact, you have to aggressively edit out anything that doesn't propel the arrow forward.
All right, on to Section 4, the domino effect, linear causal structures. We are officially leaving the endless loops behind and entering the highly linear but immensely complex structure of cause and effect.
The absolutely crucial point here is that unlike the natural cycles we just looked at, cause and effect is strictly linear. Causes must precede their effects. The cause happens and then the effect follows. It acts exactly like a line of falling dominoes. One action definitively triggers the next. It's a straight line.
Let's trace this devastating chain reaction of deforestation in the northern areas of Pakistan to see how a single primary cause triggers a massive cascade of secondary effects. Step 1. The root cause is air pollution. Now this effect immediately becomes a new cause. Step 2. Pine trees die and lose their needles. Because those needles are gone, sunlight hits the forest floor, which brings us to Step 3. Grass thrives and actually drives out native moss. Because the moss is gone, Step 4. The soil loses its power to absorb water and hardens. And finally, because the soil is hard, Step 5, heavy rain causes landslides and downstream floods. Do you see that? One single cause, air pollution, architected a 5-step cascade of destruction.
But, well, this brings us to a highly critical warning. I want to challenge you to recognize the danger of making sweeping assumptions in your writing. Just because two events happen during the exact same period of time, does it automatically mean one caused the other? No way. Absolutely not. It's incredibly easy to confuse an effect with a cause, or to assume a link where none even exists. In writing, you have to provide real evidence, not just point out that two things happen simultaneously.
Section 5. Degrees of certainty. Calibrating your claims. Because causal claims require such strict evidence, we need to explore the specific language tools used by writers to avoid making unsupported, sweeping statements.
Think of this matrix as a writer's lifeline. It shows exactly how to calibrate your scientific and causal claims. If you have 100% complete evidence, you can use strong verbs like will or must, and adverbs like certainly, definitely, or undoubtedly. But if your evidence is a bit less strong, you scale down to partial certainty. You start using cautious verbs like can, may, or might, and adverbs like probably or perhaps. And hey, if you want to make an impersonal claim where you don't commit yourself at all, you use phrases like it is said that or there is evidence to suggest that. This right here allows you to state a cause and effect relationship without overstepping your evidence.
And finally, Section 6, Mastering Cause and Effect, Shifting the Focus. Let's look at the finishing tools of text architecture to see how the physical placement of words on a page drastically alters a sentence's impact.
Because of his depression, he remained quiet. The cause and effect are clear. But notice how placing the phrase because of at the very beginning of the sentence forces the reader's attention entirely onto the root cause. The architecture of the sentence demands that you look at the depression first.
Now let's flip the syntax. He remained quiet because of his depression. The exact same words are used, conveying the exact same facts, but the focus has shifted entirely to the effect, or the final outcome, the quietness. As a writer, you have the power to decide whether the cause or the effect is more important to your reader, simply by rearranging the architecture of the sentence.
Let's examine this highly surprising claim to see this power in action. Read this carefully. Watching violence on television is beneficial because viewers get rid of aggressive impulses. Now that is a highly unconventional, maybe even shocking statement, but notice how strong causality markers, specifically the word because, followed by a detailed clause, forcefully structure the argument. By building a clear architectural bridge between a cause, which is watching TV, and a supposed effect, getting rid of impulses, the writer legitimizes and structures a highly controversial theory, demanding the reader take it seriously.
And that brings us to the ultimate realization of this explainer. Well-structured text doesn't just passively convey information, it actively dictates how that information is understood, prioritized, and believed. Whether you're building an endless cyclic loop or a strict line of falling dominoes, you are the architect. So, I leave you with this. How will the architectural choices in your next sentence reshape the reality you present to your reader? Think about that the next time you sit down to write. Thank you so much for diving into this fascinating framework with me today.